He had counted the years by winters, not birthdays, because winters were honest and birthdays were noisy lies, and the winters had come and gone over the broken mesa like slow judges, each one carving another line into the rancher's face and another silence into his cabin, and by the time the 12th winter ended he no longer remembered the sound of his own laughter, only the creak of the porch plank, the sigh of the wind through juniper, and the steady breathing of the land that had taken him in when the world pushed him out. His name was Elias Crow, a man who once rode with others and sang with others and buried others, until the graves outnumbered the voices, and he chose the only companion that never betrayed him: the work-mending fence at dawn, drawing water at noon, branding at dusk, sleeping with his boots by the door in case the coyotes sang too close. And in that hard, narrow life he believed he had made peace with solitude, not knowing solitude is a debt that comes due when you least expect it, because on a dry morning when the dust lay flat and the sky held its breath, a rider appeared on the far trail and then vanished, and later a wagon came and stopped at his gate, and from it stepped not a crate or a letter but a woman with eyes like the deep shade under cottonwoods, wearing a blue shawl stitched with patterns older than the ranch itself, and behind her stood a trader with papers in his hand and impatience in his voice, saying words like contract and delivery and mail order, as if a life could be folded into an envelope. And Elias felt the ground tilt because he had written once, in a moment of foolish loneliness, to an agency that promised companionship to men beyond the rail, and he had written with care, asking for someone who understood the land and the quiet and the weight of history. And now here was the answer standing at his door, Apache by blood and by bearing, her name spoken softly as Naya, which meant first light. And when the trader left and the dust settled, the two of them stood, facing each other with a distance between them larger than the yard, and Elias said he would not force anything, that she was free to leave, that this was a mistake. And Naya listened without lowering her eyes and said she had chosen the journey. That choice was not a simple thing in a world that had taken so much from her people, and that she had come not to be owned but to be known. And the words struck him harder than any winter, because they demanded more than kindness, they demanded courage. The days that followed were a careful dance of space and sound, meals eaten with thanks but few words, chores shared with gestures, evenings spent on opposite sides of the fire. And slowly the ranch learned a new rhythm as Naya rose before dawn to greet the light, singing softly in a language that turned the air gentle. And she mended more than fences, noticing the spring that ran shallow and teaching Elias how to coax it deeper with stone and patience. And she listened to the land as if it spoke, because it did, and she answered. And in return the land answered her, bringing grass where there had been dust, bringing calm where there had been ache. Elias learned without being taught that respect was a muscle you had to use. And when riders came with sharp smiles and sharper words, testing the boundaries of a woman alone, he stood without bravado and spoke with a steadiness that surprised even him. And Naya stood beside him, not behind. And the riders left with their laughter swallowed by the wind. Seasons turned and stories came. First small ones shared over coffee, then larger ones, about a mother who taught survival through generosity, about a father who taught silence as a shield, about a long walk away from a burned valley. And Elias shared too, about a brother lost to fever, a promise broken by war, a song he stopped singing because it hurt too much. And in the sharing something fragile and fierce grew, not romance in the cheap sense but trust. And trust is the truest love the frontier knows. There were trials, because there always are. A drought that pressed hard, a stampede that tore the night open, a sickness that laid Elias low and taught him how helpless pride can be when it meets a steady hand and a cool cloth and a prayer spoken to no one and everyone at once. And through it all Naya did not disappear into the myth others wanted to place on her. She remained a woman of choices, choosing to stay when she could leave, choosing to challenge when silence would be easier, choosing to laugh when laughter felt dangerous. And Elias learned that the letter he had written did not summon her, it summoned the man he had to become. When winter came again, the 13th, the cabin was warmer, not because of the fire but because of the way two lives had learned to share heat without stealing it. And on a night when snow made the world honest again, Elias spoke plainly, offering partnership not possession, asking for a future not a guarantee. And Naya answered with the same plainness, saying that futures are built, not promised, and that she would build if he would. And so they did, plank by plank, season by season, honoring the past without living inside its wounds. And when the valley changed, as valleys do, with a schoolhouse raised and a road cut and strangers passing through, their ranch stood as proof that the West was not only about conquest but about consent, not only about loneliness but about learning. And if this story stirred something in you, the courage to choose, the patience to listen, the respect to build, then ride with us again. Subscribe to Wild West Dairies for more true-hearted frontier tales, where grit meets grace and history finds its human voice.